All right, what's up? Welcome in. Wes Mitchell here, Chris Clark there. This is GC Live. We are brought to you by our good buddy Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, clinthammond.com, 803-422-6797, NMLS number 71597. Y'all know the drill. If you're in the market for a home or you're even thinking about being in the market for a home, hit Clint up. He's going to help you through the entire process, let you know what your monthly payments may look like, what a down payment may look like, and also just kind of walk you through every single step of home ownership. So hit him up again, 803-422-6797. Like we always tell you, 99% of you may not be in that place right now in your life. Maybe you already have a home. Maybe you're not searching for a home right now. But if you are, just give our guy Clint an opportunity to earn your business. Happy Rivalry Week. It's Monday. It is officially here. We've made it. Chris golf clapping over there. Gamecocks, Tigers this week, a top 15 matchup in the college football playoff. Maybe we'll see. I think we can say that. We'll see if the committee believes that as well. So Gamecocks, Tigers, noon kickoff, massive game. But first, got to talk about Wofford, Chris.
Yep. It's page turn Tuesday. Tomorrow, we're recording this on Monday. We're live on Monday morning. The Wofford game is still, it was really like, because of the game time, Wes, and it was kind of a long weekend for me. I was sitting there yesterday like, God, the Wofford game was literally yesterday, and it seemed kind of like it was several days ago. So there's still plenty to digest, right? Let's start here if you just want me to dive right in.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go.
Woo! I mean, Beamer was right. I mean, no reason to hide from it, no reason to sugarcoat it. The beginning of the game, he called it bad ball. It was ugly, right? You're sitting there in the second quarter, 14-9, you know? Now, I will say this. I never at any point, even when it was 14-9, I'm not sitting there going, oh boy, are we monitoring an upset here? Never felt like the game was in doubt. But it was a frustrating watch for everybody, right? For fans, it was frustrating for Shane Beamer, for the staff. It's frustrating for the players, right? I kind of thought, Wes, that Wofford would have one of those inexplicable. You remember this is a random example. I think it was 2006 Middle Tennessee game. G.A. Mangus was the offensive coordinator for Middle. They come out and throw a touchdown, I think, on the first play of the game, and lose 52-7, and I kind of figured Wofford would pop a couple plays here and there, maybe score a touchdown, not even in garbage time. But literally the first play of the game, you don't get a touchdown, but you get a busted assignment by South Carolina that leads to a long play. And you kind of just saw a lot of those frustrating things. You had what has become very uncharacteristic turnover for Lenorris Sellers early. You had a punt bounce off of you. The punt, kind of bad luck, kind of bad play, right? With a bad punt that bounces off of you. You have missed assignments, right? You have penalties. You just had a lot of things where you didn't play fantastic. Now, the good news is, and you pointed this out in your Sunday thoughts, this is a good team, and they rebounded. So 14-9, everybody's frustrated. They come out, they put together a 2-minute drive right before the half. Now it's 21-9. Then they come out in the second half and pretty much dominate the game from there. So there were positives and negatives, Wes. The positives, you came out largely injury-free. You won the game. You won it comfortably. You were able to get some of those guys in the game that we were talking about on Thursday and throughout the week. You want to get some of these seniors in. You want to get some of your backups in. You were able to do that. Negatives, I mean, you played sloppy in that first half especially. You probably had to ride the horses that got you here a little bit too long. Rocket Sanders, Lenorris Sellers, those guys, if you're being honest, they probably played too much in this game. But you came away with a win. You came away pretty healthy. You got a lot to clean up going into Clemson. I think they're saying the same thing in the upstate, even after a pretty stat line, a pretty scoreboard against the Citadel. I think Dabo Swinney's saying the same thing up there.
Yeah, and I think, man, ultimately, sometimes against these teams, it's going to play out like that. And I think the thing Carolina can at least hang its hat on is ultimately you didn't let them hang around for the entire game. Like, you did put them away. You did get the guys off the bench. You just hoped it would have been a little bit earlier. And, I thought it was kind of interesting, man. If you look at the drive chart on this thing, it's like, kind of ugly early on with a couple of touchdowns mixed in. And then it's literally touchdown, 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 and then the final touchdown. So, other than the early punt, like there were like no punts in this game basically from South Carolina, except I think that punt was when they started at the 1 yard line off the punt that got down there. But it kind of felt like they were just not really locked in early on because it was just all these little mistakes that are, frankly, going to be big mistakes if you're playing an opponent that can beat you. And it just kind of, I don't know, it was just kind of like it felt kind of scrimmagey to me, like at first. And then it was kind of like, all right, guys, lock in. You could tell Beamer didn't even seem, I don't think ticked is the word. It was more just like, what the heck, guys? Like, what is going on out here? It was like it was like a different kind of reaction, I feel like. And then, of course, they settled in. Man, they've half joked, and I don't even know if it's a joke at this point, about, hey, maybe we should run 2-minute drill at all times. Or, Dow apparently made a comment at some point where he's like, man, can we implement a play where it just automatically makes Lenorris a scrambler because he's gotten so good at just making things happen. Like, just schoolyard, just, hey, everybody just run down there.
Yeah.
And then Lenorris, you escape the pocket and let's see what happens. But my point, I mean, dude, when they're in this 2-minute drill, like, I think there's enough evidence now, like there is something to it, because you look end of half on Saturday, they looked the best they had at any point in the game to that point on offense. You go back end of half against Missouri, obviously great 2-minute drive. End of game against Missouri, so it's a minute drive, but still a 2-minute deal. And I would even say the drive before the final drive against Missouri, there is still like, I think 9 minutes or so left when that drive started, but you had that sense of urgency that you have in a 2-minute drive. So and I think they scored the second to last drive of the half against Missouri as well, if I remember correctly. So you're talking about basically 3 straight legitimate 2-minute drives where you have executed and scored touchdowns, and really maybe 4 or 5 when you've kind of been in that tempo that you've scored. And like, I don't think South Carolina needs to go into being, Lane Kiffin at FAU or like hyperspeed Gus Malzahn back in the day. Most teams have kind of gotten away from that just fast pace all the time stuff. There is something to be said, though, for how much this offense has been able to get into a rhythm when they have played with a little bit of tempo. So I think that's something to maybe look into if you're this staff, like, and I'm sure they are. I'm not saying this is like some crazy thought, but I think there's something to that idea that they kind of have been able to get Sellers in a rhythm when there has been a little bit more pace in terms of how they play.
Yeah, and I think it's been the pace. I think it's been, frankly, rising to the occasion, right? I mean, you talk about this a lot, Wes, when Lenorris Sellers kind of has his back against the wall. He kind of rises to the occasion, right? And there were times where they had to do that even on Saturday against Wofford early or kind of in the third quarter when you're up 21-9 and you're looking to go ahead and put the game away, and they were able to. For South Carolina, what you want to see in a game like this is, this is a game where your talent, superiority, skill, athleticism, speed should show through. And so on one hand, there were too many plays where you're having to do something big to make up ground. You think they had some penalties on first down where you're sitting there in second and long, but Rocket Sanders he breaks a bunch of tackles or makes a bunch of guys miss. This is why you recruit, right? To your point earlier about Dowell kind of joking about, well, let's just call a play where we let pressure get to Lenorris because he's making so many things happen. Again, this is why you recruit players like Lenorris Sellers and Rocket Sanders. That's why you want to get these type of guys on your team. It makes play calling and offense a lot easier. So you kind of just look at the growth, Wes, of this offense. Go back to the beginning of the season. They weren't as efficient. They weren't making as many, plays when things broke down. And they were turning the football over at a high clip. You now go to game 11, and they kind of had some regression, right, into some of those things, turnovers and penalties. But this is a team that if you just take the whole body of work in the second half of the season, this is a team that's now, being penalized less, taking less sacks, able to be more efficient out of its base offense, able to run some 2-minute, able to make plays more efficiently and make big plays when things break down. Rocket Sanders looks better than he did in the first half of the season. So you've the receivers just individually, look at what Nick Carber is doing. Third straight game where you're looking around going, Nick Carber looks like a wide receiver, right? Delvon Campbell has come on the past couple games. So you have seen the progression of this offense. And that's why, just one reason why you didn't feel like the game was in doubt. You weren't sitting there going, well, the South Carolina team can't score. They've shown in the last several weeks that they can score. And they turned it on in the second half. They cleaned up a lot of the just silly errors that they had been making throughout the game. Were able to make some explosive plays, were able to get some chunk plays, and go down and do, what you thought they would do against Wofford.
Yeah, and ultimately, man, I mean, there were some ugly moments early on. I think once you dive into the box score, though, it's like, all right, South Carolina 34 first downs to Wofford 14.
Yeah.
South Carolina 10 of 12 on third down, Wofford 2 of 12. South Carolina 608 yards of offense, 252 yards for Wofford. This is an offense of Carolina that, I don't think they're putting up 600 plus yards, frankly, on anybody to start the year. And then to go out there and do that on Saturday and really just ultimately take the game over, held them to 1.3 yards a carry on offense, 5.8 yards a carry for South Carolina. That yards per rush, I did some rough math on it. It's only about 2 yards a carry, even if you take out the sack yardage on there that Carolina held their offense, which is really a run-based offense, is Wofford. Like, that's what they kind of try to build their offense around, and just kind of kept them out of that comfort zone. I think Wofford maybe hit a few more throws in there, had a few more little just kind of off-platform scramble drill type throws that they hit. But, for the most part, you got what you wanted out of this game and just moved on. You mentioned the injuries and lack of that. Vandrevius Jacobs really was the only serious injury. I felt for that kid, man. That looked like it was incredibly painful. And so, don't want to speculate there, but just based on what you saw there, I would not think he's going to play this week. But I really just hated that for him because it looked like it was just a very awkward roll up when he hit, and you could tell he was in quite a bit of pain. So, heart out to him. Hope that he's okay and recovering quickly from that. But for the most part, Carolina overall, Chris, even though they had to play Sellers a little bit longer than you probably wanted to, Rockets out there later, your offensive line's out there later. These defensive guys, man, some of them are just hard to get off the field, I think. I think they almost have selective hearing and just maybe just stay out there. Even, there was a funny moment I'll get to in a second with Nick E, but
I was thinking of the same thing if we're thinking of the same one.
Yeah. And so yeah, you maybe wanted to get Robbie in there a little bit earlier and get that process going. But, I thought they had to run Sellers a little bit more. Like, it's hard. It's something I mentioned. I understand I'm being this is something where you're being kind of ticky-tack. They rushed for 265 yards, and that was really over 280 yards if you take out the sacks. So on rushes, 280 plus yards. Early on, I was kind of wanting a little bit more out of the just hand the ball, a little bit more production out of the just hand the ball off, knock them back, and get your running backs the football. I thought they had to incorporate a couple of more little hits on Sellers than I would have really wanted to have to if I was the staff. But again, I think you're like that to me also says how much our maybe expectations for this offense have shifted as the year has gone on. Like if you said this to the staff, like, hey guys, why don't you run the football better? They're like, dude, we rushed for almost 300 yards. Like you're kind of being a little over the top, but that's just kind of, you can be ticky-tack in a game like this where you expect to like physically dominate the opponent and really you dive into the stats. For the most part, they did, but it was just, like you said, took a little bit longer than you really maybe wanted to.
Yeah, I think most things are in nitpick territory with this game, but you also look at it. You made a great point at the beginning of the show. What you're sitting there thinking about during the game, and, this sounds like a shot at Wofford, and it's not, but it's just there's a huge difference in these two teams, obviously. And so you're sitting there going, man, South Carolina is just shooting itself in the foot. They're not playing that well and, making mistake after mistake, but they're still winning. And you still feel very good about their chances to win and probably still win by a significant margin. What you're thinking about in the stands is they better clean this up before next week, right? I mean, that's really, what it comes down to. So I had the same thought on the run game. It's like early on, they're handing the ball off to Rocket Sanders, and there's too many times where he's being hit at the line of scrimmage. I will say that's one expectation I had in addition to not having a lot of the self-inflicted stuff we were seeing at the beginning of the game. I did think South Carolina would be able to physically dominate earlier in the game with some explosive runs, etc. But I'll tell you, Wes, I mean, Wofford threw out the kitchen sink. I mean, Beamer talked about it after the game. It's their last game. They're out there, fake punt, motion. I mean, they're doing everything, right? So you had to kind of expect that going in. And I can't really put my finger on why South Carolina got out to that slow start, but they did. It was just kind of sloppy. But the talent gap was so much, and to the team's credit, they rebounded.
Yeah, they locked in. And no, so Nicky, I don't know if y'all caught this. Most of y'all probably did. He gets like banged up in the game. Which, I mean, Nick is one tough customer. Like, let's give him credit. That dude is tough. He will fight through it. He gets banged up. I'm watching him. You can tell he's kind of limping a little bit. I think he maybe fell on his hip or something anyway. And he's like kind of about to come off, but then he doesn't. And then Wofford's getting lined up. So he goes and gets lined up. I'm pretty sure makes the tackle.
He did.
On the play. Pops up. He's still hurting. Peyton Williams comes running on. And Nick's just like, nah.
He waved him off.
I'm good. So, I mean, if you're at the point, if you're a scout evaluator and, you're trying to, speaking of nitpicking, you're honestly in nitpick territory with Nick Emmanwori at this point. Like, the production, the athleticism, like all the things you're looking for on the surface, they're all there. Like, you've already checked every single one of those boxes. Competitiveness, man, like this is Wofford. Again, no disrespect to Wofford. This is Wofford, and you're waving off the other guy because you're just like, nah, I got it. We're good here. That maybe makes me check off one more box, I think, if I'm an NFL team looking at this guy too.
Yeah, it was hilarious. So I think the sequence was makes a tackle on the left side of the field, hurt, almost goes down, looked like his teammates were telling him, like, dude, if you're hurt, like, let's go down here. So it's not a Ole Miss faking an injury. Like, he's hurt, clearly. almost goes down, decides not to, kind of getting lined up. Peyton Williams run on the field, waves him off. Then Nick makes the tackle on the next play. Like, he made the next tackle. I remember, like, I saw him. I'm like, oh, he's going right in the pile. And the announcer's like, Nick Emmanwori on the tackle. Like, oh my God. So, yeah, I mean, they played. It was kind of similar, Wes, to in the past. Like, they did rotate Judge and Vakari Swain some at corner. The DBs played, not all the game, right? Because they did get in a lot of youngsters. I mean, they played 75 players in this game, I think. On offense and defense, and a few more on special teams. So almost 80 guys, I think, played in this game, if not 80 on the nose. Linebacker, you played your guys a good bit, but we saw a lot of Fred Johnson, and then he got an outsized portion of snaps up front. TJ Sanders only played 3 snaps. I think he had something kind of flare up, Beamer said, afterwards. Looked like he was fine, but no need to push that envelope. So, defensively, they actually rotated even a little bit more than I thought, just sitting there watching it right off the bat. Did you play your guys a little bit more than you wanted? Maybe. But did you still run away comfortably and get a bunch of guys in at the end? You definitely did.
Do you know how many total plays Wofford ran, Chris?
I do not.
Your head?
No.
I mean, a lot of times too. Now Wofford stayed on the field a little bit, like time possession was half and half, but like you're just not playing as many snaps overall. So I feel like defensively, sometimes it's almost hard to get those guys on the field and get their snaps. But I think like the kind of late sub guys, they were getting in for like 5-6 snaps.
Yeah.
I didn't even see Wendell Gregory get in there, but he got in for
he did
1 snap. But anyway, yeah, so I think, man, as we kind of start to close the book on this one, how about Sellers? Like, this dude, from the moment he threw that pick and then like that step, like that moment forward, he was just incredible. And
yeah,
I still don't think Lenorris quite gets the credit he deserves for the level of passer that he already is. Like, who knows what it's going to be with another year under his belt, another year of comfort, another year of just kind of seeing everything. Like, hold on, we're getting.
You're good. Up.
Hey, look, I'm not even touching the mic, and we're getting disconnected and reconnected.
Clemson.
For those who don't, for those who don't know, I'm not just a moron who keeps muting my mic when that happens. This is the most sensitive cord I've ever. If I just bump it, if anything even looks at the cord, it unhooks, and then when it unhooks, the software we use freaks out and is like, hey, you're muted. So then you have to unmute yourself because it automatically mutes it. So that's what that is. Anyway, Sellers, we know he's a dude, but I think he's getting more and more accurate in terms of the touch pass.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like his touch is rapidly improving. His just comfort level, delivering the football. We know he can throw on the run. And I mean, there was a great stat. I think I've seen it multiple places, but how basically he's more dangerous than anybody in the entire country when he's outside the pocket in terms of creating explosive plays. But it's not just that. It's knowing when to put zip on the ball, knowing when to kind of layer the ball over different areas of the defense. And then just, man, when people are wide open, I mean, the throw to Larvadam where he's just wide open going to the end zone. The fact that Sellers, like, sometimes you see guys who are more runners. If a guy's wide open like that, they almost kind of overthink it, or their technique kind of gets messed up a little bit. He just flicks the ball out to him, perfect throw, doesn't overthink it. And I mean, this is improvement that we're seeing. all the way along. But I think part of it is just he just does not get the credit quite yet, as much as people talk about him as a player, of just how just like natural of a passer that he actually is.
Well, and he's gotten better in that. We've been talking every week about how he's getting better, and even the touch pass, that's an area he's gotten better on. Go back to the beginning of the year. I mean, a great example, Wes, is the 2-point play against Bama, right? That people were just destroying him for. And he was under pressure during that play, but, you sail that throw. There were other instances of that earlier in the season where you got a throw that looks makeable and you just miss it a little bit. And he's improved in that regard too. The throw to Larvadane that you just mentioned, the downfield throws to Delvon Campbell. I mean, one of them got called back, but the deep ball, I mean, thing of beauty, right? He's gotten really good at the tight end seam ball over the middle in the red zone. Has gotten to be, really good for them. I remember early in the year, I had somebody tell me Lenorris isn't seeing the seam route well. Now he is, right? That's why you don't say this guy's a finished product as a redshirt freshman after a game, 2 games, 3 games. He's not a finished product going into game 12, which is exciting and probably scary for some opponents, right? So, yeah, he just seems to get better. Wes, I tried to go back and I don't know if maybe you saw, I didn't hear all of Lenorris's comments, to be honest, after the game. Did he say anything about the interception as far as what he saw, didn't see?
I'm not sure.
I'm not either. I don't know if my first inclination was that's kind of a long throw and he trusted his arm. And not that he can't make it, but just let me fit this in here and it didn't fit, or if he didn't see the guy. But from there on out, I mean, great performance, right? And that kind of goes back to just not making those same mistakes. He looked, Wes, Lenorris is pretty even keel. After the touchdown to take it, I can't remember if it's the one right before the half to take it at 21-9 or the one where South Carolina scored its 28th point. He looked, he's pretty low key a lot of the time. He looked like PO'd almost a little bit. I think there was a little bit of like, we did not play very well in this first half, right? Or it might have just been Lenorris being Lenorris, but he definitely turned it on from there. Man, just fun to watch. And, Wes, there are a lot of teams across the country that struck me this weekend talking to some people as well. There are a lot of teams across the country that would love brand name programs that would love to have Lenorris Sellers on their team. Love. So enjoy having him for sure.
Yeah, I think you could make a long list of teams that would love to have him. Some of them will probably be sliding into his DMs in the offseason. Let's be honest. Like that's the world we live in right now. Craig says, he was just late on that throw. I kind of thought the same thing, Craig. I thought maybe he got there a half second late. Beamer, was that teleconference, I think, said maybe he wanted him just to come on off of that one and on to the next progression in that read. But anyway, yeah, I'm actually, even though it was a pick, I kind of love the fact that he had the moxie, we'll say, to even deliver that ball. Like that was a seed. I think if he throws it a half second earlier, maybe it's a different result. But I mean, it kind of, once he got rolling, it actually reminded me a little bit of Spencer last year against Furman, where you're just delivering throw after throw after throw, and very, very impressive. Craig also earlier mentioned Delvon Campbell. Hey, man, let's talk about a few more individuals. So, game on the line, you have one play, and you have to pick one wide receiver. I mean, and you can't throw to a tight end because I think Josh Simon's probably he's probably your guy, right, at this point. Is Delvon Campbell now where you're going with the football? Like this dude down the stretch, and it's fascinating to me. Many of the things we talked about in the preseason, and we said kind of like, hey, if this happens, South Carolina can have a special year. if that happens, South Carolina can have a special year. And, you know, for example, like one of them was, hey, is Sellers going to be a redshirt freshman or is Sellers going to be Superman? And we've seen as the year has gone along, you know, he started out as a redshirt freshman and now he took his little suit off and became Superman. And so I think for Carolina, one of the things we talked about, like, hey, can some of these receivers emerge a little bit? And Delvon Campbell, I mean, it's been very late in the year. But, I mean, dude is out there making plays at this point and looks like the receiver we kind of thought South Carolina may have landed when they got him out of the portal.
Yeah, that is actually what I wrote on Sunday, is that he now looks like the guy that I think South Carolina staff thought he could be coming in. And Beamer has given him a lot of credit the past couple weeks. You know, when asked after the Missouri game, oh, Delvon Campbell made 2 huge plays. Where has he been? Beamer kind of took it back to practice, right? So now down the stretch, I mean, hey, this is a 6-year guy. He's playing in his last couple or few games. Don't write off a guy until the end, right? And so when they got Delvon Campbell out of the portal, what did we hear, Wes? It was, okay, well, here's a guy. You know, this is not a big receiver room. You have Nick Harbor. You don't have a lot of size. Delvon Campbell's going to come in at 6'4", 230. He can give you a downfield presence. He can run. He's not super shifty, super wiry. He's a big guy who has straight line speed, right? And so you see, Wes, when he gets the ball, we saw it against Missouri. We saw it on Saturday against Wofford. When he gets the ball, he's heading straight. You know, he's going. He's not really – he can break tackles, as we saw against Missouri, and we saw it on his unfortunately called back touchdown pass. Man, got to get this guy a touchdown as a Gamecock. He really deserved one. He was close on another play, had the one call back, slipped on the other, but he just has kind of a nose for making big plays. You know, he's a big presence over the middle. He can really run straight line as a big guy. So I think you're right. I think Dow Loggins and the staff, they're sitting around thinking about the Clemson game, thinking about big play potential. If you got any shot plays, if you got any third down plays, this is a guy that you're probably thinking about for sure. And you weren't saying that at the beginning of the year.
No, you weren't. And you weren't saying it at the middle of the year either. It's just kind of been right there at the end of the season. Justin says Nick H coming on too. Yeah, I mean, Nick, that's Nick with a Y, Justin. Come on, let's lock in. Nick Harbor with a Y. Nick has looked as comfortable as, I mean, he ever has, right? Like the last few weeks, I think kind of is showing that it wasn't a fluke. Like I think you started maybe Vandy weekend or so, started saying, all right, like, hey, he's showing signs of progress. And then the thing with Nick, when the ball is in the air now, he looks comfortable going and catching the football. Like before, there was a little bit of, I feel like maybe trying to body the ball just because you don't quite trust your hands. And almost overnight, and I'm sure it hasn't been overnight for him. Like that's kind of that's probably not fair to him. Like he has been busting his tail to get to that point. So that's not what I'm trying to say. But yeah, it's like a switch has been flipped to where that confidence and that comfort level is there. And gotta love it for that kid, man. Like that was such a wholesome moment last week when he brought his game ball into the post-game press conference. Like, this kind of shows you what it means to Nick. And it's easy to get caught up in, oh, he's a 5-star, he's a viral sensation in track, and, 6'5", 10'1", all that stuff. But Craig says he still kind of basket catches it. I don't know, Craig. I think you were seeing Nick slowly. Watch how he catches the ball now compared to how he caught the ball early this year. He has slowly got more and more comfortable with his hands. And anybody who's played a sport knows it's kind of, if you're not comfortable doing something, you may be completely comfortable doing it in practice. And then if there's that little bit of doubt, that little hesitation, you get in a game and you're like, oh, no, I got to catch it. I'm not going to use my hands. And really in your mind, hey, ultimately hand catching the ball, especially if you're going to get hit, is how you have to play the game. But there's kind of always a little, in my opinion, a little mental hurdle there for guys to sometimes take something from practice into a game setting, especially in front of 80,000 people. And so I think lots of credit to Nick for just working hard to get more and more comfortable doing so.
Man, I'll tell you what, too. And I don't mean to pick on Wofford, but the play that it's kind of like a little seam route that he ran, had him in the slot on the touchdown. And Wofford took a look at that and was like, let's put a linebacker on Nick, in man coverage. And that was just, I think probably when Wofford made that defensive call, you're praying, all right, hopefully he doesn't run exactly what South Carolina ran, which is a vertical route, because he ran past him and you saw the linebacker turn to run, and there was absolutely no shot on that one. So, but yeah, he does. I mean, this is 3 games in a row where you look at Nick and he just looks more comfortable. He looks more comfortable catching the ball. He looks more comfortable running routes. We've seen him make different types of catches, right? We've seen sideline wide open. We've seen contested sideline. We've seen over the middle. We've seen him make a guy miss on an out route and get to the sticks and get past the sticks. Like, we're seeing some growth there. And I think Wes credit Mike Fury, right? Because you kind of take a look at this receiver room. Mazio Bennett, I mean, is a guy that we all thought was ready to play as a freshman because he's just an advanced route runner and just he's got a really bright football mind. But there is something to be said for helping a guy like that get ready to go play in the SEC. And you look at the growth of some of the other receivers. Campbell, even though it's taken a while, and he's in his 6th year, right? But he's grown within the structure of this offense. Nick Carver, his growth. I mean, that's probably the biggest example, right? Gage Larvinan, I mean, he has played a lot of football in college. He was banged up early in the year, but he has come on, in the last several weeks. So Bieber talked about that on Saturday after the game, where they thought that their receiver room would progress and get better as the season went on. And I think there is some evidence that that's happened.
Yeah, no doubt, man. All right, y'all, before we get too much further, about to forget here. Let me tell you about our friends over at Game Time. And man, the rivalry game, I'm not going to say it's the biggest game in the history of the rivalry at this point, but you can definitely make the argument. And if you're just sitting there going, hey, I cannot miss this. Like, I want to be there. I want to be in the stadium. Potentially a play-in for the playoffs. Certainly is an elimination game for the playoffs. Like, if you don't win this thing, you got no shot if you're South Carolina. And so, guys, if you're just like, hey, I just want to go to the game, hit up our friends at Game Time by going to gametime.co or downloading the Game Time app on the App Store right now. Go in here. You can search for concerts, events, of course, football games, baseball games, whatever else. And you can see it right there. There is the South Carolina version of Death Valley right there. You can click through. You can see exactly what your view from the tickets would be. You can see where the best deals are. What I like to do is toggle on all-in pricing and GT picks. And that's going to give you, 1, you're not going to have all those fees added in at the end. And 2, it's going to give you the best deals that are available right now on the app. So again, check that out. Game Time and gametime.co. And if you use the code ON3, you get $20 off your first purchase on Game Time right now, though terms do apply. So shout out to Game Time for their support of our show and several other shows on the On3 network. Let's see. All right. I feel like there was somebody else I wanted to talk about, Chris. How about the little wrinkle when I saw 88 run out there at tight end? I was like, all right, South Carolina has put the world's biggest tight end into the game. And Shivers had the long hair coming out. And just it kind of reminded me a little bit of when Carolina played Jacksonville State last year, and they basically installed Juju as kind of a slot guy during the week. And essentially, you had Luedecke basically taking your tight end reps. Like they went kind of 4 wide, but Luke's lining up almost kind of like a slot H-back type guy. And so in certain situations, you had Luke taking tight end reps. And then, of course, in other situations, you had Jatavius taking your tight end reps as like a 6th offensive lineman, additional blocker. Obviously, getting a couple of those tight ends back healthy is going to be a important thing going to this week. But first, what did you think the little wrinkle there? I thought pretty good way to get a couple of guys on the field that just haven't played as much.
Yeah, I mean, really necessity. You had to get kind of creative, and not that this wasn't like the bowl game against Notre Dame a couple years ago where Nate Atkins gets hurt, and you're like, we don't have a tight end on scholarship or at all. This is you had some guys. We saw some of them. Connor Cox come into the game, but South Carolina was down 3 tight ends, and its top 3 tight ends. No Josh Simon. No Brady Hunt. Brady Hunt will definitely be out for the Clemson game. No Michael Smith. And so Simon and Smith are the ones you're monitoring for Clemson. And so you had to get creative, right? We saw a combination of it ultimately. We saw the insertion of Shivers, as you said, as that kind of blocking tight end, 6 offensive linemen. We saw more 4 wide. To me, it made sense. We are all talking about going into the game, get Luedecke an opportunity. And so Beamer looked at Luedecke and said, I mean, we know Beamer loves Luedecke. We're going to get him more PT, right, out of this group. So you had more 4 wide, and then you had some backups play, some of your backup tight ends. But it did strike me during the game, Wes, like, you often hear the tight end's a big part of what South Carolina likes to do. And that was pretty evident, I mean, you're not only from a playmaking standpoint. I mean, how many plays has Josh Simon made for this team this year, right? But even just from a structural standpoint of how you want to administer the offense, the tight end's a big one for Dow Loggins and for this offense.
Yeah, for sure. A bunch of guys caught passes in this game, which is always good. Got, just opportunities for multiple guys who maybe haven't played as much. Peyton Mangrum was out there kind of early, out there a pretty good bit. He had a catch for 16. Eric Rice had a catch. Of course, they got Bradley Dunn involved, getting a touchdown late. Let's see, Mo Brown, a catch for a touchdown. So I think pretty good job of just mixing it up and getting multiple guys into the game. A lot of people have been asking about the tight ends for this week. And, I think it's a valid question. I will say this, Simon was able to finish the Missouri game. And that doesn't always mean anything, but I do think if I'm right, I'm pretty sure he was already banged up before that final drive. And, to me, it's going to take a lot to keep that kid off the field. We'll see what that looks like as the week progresses. But certainly, if you didn't have all 3 of those guys, which we know Brady's out, that would really kind of hurt this offense. And it's not an excuse. They'll go out there and play and do what they need to do. But certainly they want 6 on the field on Saturday at Clemson.
Yeah, you want 6 on the field. I mean, we were talking earlier about who you're drawing up plays for, and you mentioned Josh Simon, right? Like, that's a guy, Dow Loggins structuring a game plan. He's going to be looking at, whether it's in-game adjustments or heading into the week, how can we get 6 involved? And he's done it time and time again. So huge for this offense. And Wes, Brady Hunt, even though he doesn't have, the pass catching numbers, he's played a lot. And he's played a good bit of football in college. He's played a good bit here. He's another guy that's very important to what South Carolina does. You won't have him. You know that. But Michael Smith is a freshman, very big catch against Missouri for a touchdown, right? So, another guy that can cause a lot of problems in the passing game with his athleticism. So you'd love to have both of them back. Gives you more of a You won't have a full slate, right? You won't have your full strength roster because of the lack of Brady Hunt, but you definitely want those guys back, especially number 6, Josh Simon.
Yeah, and Brady's a guy I kind of think going into next year has the ability to be a little bit more involved in the pass game. I think it's just a matter of, we know what Josh has done as the year has progressed. I mean, Josh has become more and more of not just kind of what you think of with a tight end target, but more of like a top target for this offense when he's in the game and when he's healthy. But Brady, I could actually see Brady's arc being a little bit like what we saw from Josh, where Josh was, kind of the 1B option at tight end last year, and now has become 1A, and where Brady plays a pretty good bit more going into next year. Of course, Carolina, we'll see how Michael Smith progresses. Gamecocks have an offer out to a transfer portal tight end officially. So, let that begin. And, portal season is upon us. So we're getting a little ahead of ourselves there. But Brady Hunt, a talented dude. And luckily they do expect him back for postseason play, whatever that looks like. And speaking of postseason play, Chris, the Gamecocks' chances of kind of finding a way into this playoff, they have jumped a little bit, because really you needed what? You needed wins yourself. Like, you have to keep winning, and you need chaos. And I think it was really difficult to even, for a couple of weeks there, like I've seen people put out like, hey, we need this to happen. We need this to happen, blah, blah, blah. It's really hard to actually find that path, because, hey, if that team knocks off that team, then yeah, a team ahead of you loses, but then what does that do for the team that just won? And the way that the playoff is structured, you do have some automatic qualifiers. You do have a group of 5 team that's definitely going to get in there. You do have maybe a unofficial cap on the number of SEC schools that are going to get in. But I don't know if you're Carolina, if it could have gone much better for you over the weekend in terms of just some teams getting knocked back a level to where now they're in the conversation with you, as opposed to there being a clear line of them being ahead of you. And Chris, I got to say, man, as just a football fan, the Auburn A&M game was one of the best games I've seen in a long time.
Awesome atmosphere. I mean, if you've never been to Auburn for a night game, especially, it can be a really good atmosphere. It certainly looked like it. Man, I felt for A&M, the receiver that dropped that pass. I mean, it was right there. Drop the pass, lose the game. Tough, but a fantastic game, right? And so just more chaos, right? Not, if you're kind of looking at it from a South Carolina standpoint, let me say this first. I've seen some people say, stop talking about it. South Carolina has no shot, even with the Clemson win. Not true. You don't have no shot. I mean, there is a shot. The computers say they have a shot. Computers won't make the decision. The decision will be made by automatic qualifiers, like you said, and then a group of humans. And with a group of humans, you don't want to go as far as to say anything can happen. There is some type of baseline, but Carolina's in the mix. Where they're ranked, you can see them moving up. And some of the action that we saw this weekend, Wes, hurt the chances for some other teams. I don't think you had absolutely everything that you wanted to go your way. You didn't have Notre Dame lose to Army, for instance. You didn't have Boise State lose, even though they were on the ropes, to Wyoming. A 2-win Wyoming team, by the way. But you did have some other things happen, certainly, that gives you a more favorable position. It puts you in more striking distance. It upped your percentage somewhat. It's silly to say South Carolina has 0% chance. It's silly to say win and they're in, because I don't think that's accurate either. But what I do think we can say is you're at least going to make the committee if you can beat Clemson. Got chaos this past weekend. Probably going to be more chaos this coming weekend, if we had to guess, based on the entirety of the college football year and what we've seen so far. You're at least going to make the committee look at South Carolina and say, all right, are they in or are they out? It is at least a question, and that's all you can ask for at this point.
Yeah, and so the college football playoff predictor, for whatever it is worth, now gives Carolina, if they beat Clemson, a 58% chance to get in.
Wow.
So that is significantly higher than it's been at any point the entire season, which, I think to be at a point where you're basically a coin flip plus a little bit more of getting in. And again, you can debate, maybe you don't think the thing's very accurate. That's fine. I tend to think it is a little bit more of just a discussion piece than anything, but it does give you a kind of a broad idea of whether your team, in this case South Carolina, is like truly in the conversation or not. And obviously they are. I will be very curious to see. This thing normally adjusts in the middle of the week after the committee, because right now it is just going off last week's committee plus the math of what happened on Saturday. What does it sort of adjust to after you add in the human element of what the committee says on Tuesday? And so new rankings will come out on Tuesday night, 8:00 ESPN. And so it's kind of, I do think they made this thing a little bit freaking confusing, Chris, because you see a lot of people arguing on Twitter about some media people are projecting the seeds. Like they're actually trying to project, here's the 12-team field. Here's how it's going to play out. And then some people are doing their actual, just their rankings. And that can be a very different thing, obviously. I think that the thing you want for Carolina, obviously 6 teams ahead of you losing, is that just in a vacuum, that's good, right? Like that helps. But ultimately down the stretch, you want for as many of these other leagues to be losing bids as possible. Like you want for the ACC to be a 1 bid league, basically. So I think to me, obviously Carolina to get in would have to beat Clemson anyway. So can you get Clemson out of there? Could SMU lose this week and then lose to Miami? So then Miami takes the automatic for ACC, but then that's the only team that gets in.
Yeah.
I think the Big 12 is headed towards probably just one team anyway, right?
Yep.
It certainly feels like it. So I think for, and it's hard to really, there's still so many variables, but your 5 automatics, then your Notre Dame's going to take a spot at this point.
Yep. If they lose to Southern Cal.
If they lose to Southern Cal, they're probably out.
2 losses to unranked teams. There will be a mutiny across college sports if they're in with 2 unranked losses.
I agree.
I would say. But so possible.
Maybe that happens.
Maybe. You're going to have SEC chaos, right? If South Carolina can beat Clemson, they'll have 3 losses. There are other 3-loss SEC teams right now. And there could be more after this weekend. Tennessee has to play Vandy. Might be sitting there saying, Tennessee ain't going to lose to Vandy. How do we know? We don't know that. Vandy beat Alabama earlier this year. It's just a lot of chaos, more maybe to come. Going to be fun, for sure.
Williams says A&M beats Texas. See, do you want that or not, though? Because you actually don't want A&M. You want A&M being one of the teams you're ahead of. If A&M beats Texas, they'd go to the SEC championship. And if they win the SEC championship, they're in. And I think Georgia is in regardless. So I think you want Texas to win that game and just go ahead and just eliminate them. Garnet Yardbird says no automatic bid for specific conferences. 5 high. Yeah, that's true. But you still have 5. If you're looking at it from a numbers perspective, there's still going to be 5 automatic bids from somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, Wes, if you start looking at it, man, so, look at the top of the SEC standings right now. Wow. It is wild. But so Texas at 10-1. Of course, they play A&M. A&M's at 8-3, 5-2 in conference. But you got Texas. Here's kind of the ordering right now based on conference record, and then it goes to obviously overall record. Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, A&M, South Carolina, and Alabama. LSU's the next. They have 3 conference losses, but they have a 4th loss to Southern Cal, non-conference. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams. So even if Georgia lost in the SEC title game, they would have a 3rd conference loss in the title game. Like you said, hard to punish them for making the title game and losing, right? Even if Tennessee lost to Vandy, they would have 3 conference losses. If A&M lost to Texas this weekend, they would have 3 conference losses. And then you'd have South Carolina and Bama with 3 conference losses, assuming that
A&M
both
already
lose.
has an out-of-conference loss, too.
They have an out-of-conference loss, too.
A&M with a loss is done.
They're done. So basically it would be Georgia, Tennessee, Carolina, and Bama. So it'd be 4 schools, even if Tennessee lost to Vandy, right? So then the question is like, does a 3-loss team get in? And if so, which one or how many, right? So, Wes, here's something to do because we could do this all day. Will a 3-loss SEC team get in?
Yes.
A.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, you got to have Ole Miss in there too.
Yeah, and I got to have Ole Miss. That's right. Ole Miss, quality of the losses, probably the worst out of those teams.
Well, dude, I think you could actually make a heck of a case for Carolina over Alabama. But Alabama is going to have the brand name factor. How much we're talking about humans? How much does that play in? If it were to come down to South Carolina and Alabama,
yeah,
some Alabama people will go, hey, head to head.
Head to head.
Well, but hey, head to head. But it was a tight football game in Tuscaloosa. So does head to head not? Yes, head to head matters, but does it not matter where you played the game?
Yeah. But at some point, if I'm playing devil's advocate, it's like at some point you do have to stop playing the hypothetical game, or at some point you do have to say the result matters.
Yeah, the result matters, but Alabama has way worse losses than Carolina.
They do. Those results matter too. Yeah. So
you got smashed by Oklahoma of all people, a team that Carolina
destroyed.
The game was over in the first 5 minutes.
I know. Dude, I would hate to have to try to figure it out because here's the reality. When you are trying to, and I'm saying it's a reality and it's almost kind of hypothetical. If the goal of the committee is to attempt to pick the 12 best teams, again, you've got some of it's out of your hands. It's automatic qualifiers, right? I get that. If you're trying to pick all the other teams that should be in the 12 beyond those 5 AQs, how are you looking at it? It's all about your perspective. Are you going, well, this team's record, or are you going, this is the best? Because the committee has done some of both, and they've said both. Like Ward Manuel, who's the AD at Michigan, who's the chair of the selection committee, he has said both those things. They seem to be, with how they're ranking teams, Wes, very much leaning towards record, right? Wins and losses, playing the schedule that's in front of you. But at the same time, he also talks a lot about watching the games and how that's their number one factor, So which one is it? Well, probably just they'll pick one of those based on which teams they let in. But it will be fascinating to see the direction that they ultimately land on, because it has not been consistent, right? You can't say, oh, I see exactly what they're doing from week to week, because it's human. No, it's not a computer. It's human. Humans picking these teams and ranking these teams right now, and the final selections will also be from humans. So I don't really think we know, like what they're ultimately going to lean on. You can make cases for all sorts of things, for sure.
Well, and even when we find out how they feel this week, it could change again next week, and it could change again because you have this week's, you have next week's, and then you have the final ones after the conference championship. So even if you think you're in, you may not be. And I can't help but think, and maybe there's enough other chaos to where this shifts. I can't help but think it's going to come down to, can Vanderbilt knock off Tennessee? And then they're right back down there in the conversation with all the 3-loss SECs.
Yeah.
And can Notre Dame lose to Southern Cal? And that's assuming you don't I kind of feel like that's assuming you don't have like a bid stolen in there, so to speak, because I feel like Miami could probably still get in without the ACC championship, which is not what you want, right? Clemson clearly needs the ACC championship to get in. SMU, where does the committee, here's the question, where does the committee this week see Indiana?
Yeah.
Where do they see an SMU this week? And how high, obviously, if you're Carolina, but Carolina and Clemson should move ahead of Colorado, A&M, and BYU in this week's rankings.
Yeah. Again, that's an example of some things that were good that happened for you. I do think that you're right, Wes. It'll depend this week to next week after the final round of games where their heads are at. Could be different. But I do think some of their moves will, like you said, Indiana. What do they think of Indiana if they submarine them in the rankings? And I don't think, Indiana ain't going to fall out, right? Totally. But I do think it will, maybe they will. I do think that would signal, okay, the door's open for somebody to jump them. So that might give us a little bit more of an idea. Not going to be the end all be all on Tuesday night when these things come out, but it might show us, it might show you a couple little things that give us a little bit of a clue or a hint as to their thinking.
So Indiana at 10-0, and we're going to get off here because we could just do this all day, but Indiana at 10-0 right now was 5th this past week. And then, of course, they fall to 10-1 with the loss to Ohio State. So Notre Dame will definitely jump them. Alabama lost. They will not. Miami will jump them. Ole Miss lost. They will not. Does 9-2 Georgia, 9-2 Tennessee jump Indiana? I would say yes.
Maybe so.
I think they definitely will, but that's just my opinion. Then the question becomes, all right, does 10-1 Boise or 10-1 SMU jump Indiana? Because then if you're Indiana, you're getting right to the back end of the 12 at that point, which is a scary thing if you're them. So Garnet Yardbird says Tulane's only 2 losses are the top 20 teams. Won their last 3 by 121-9. They went out and win the American. ... Yeah, I mean, Tulane, that's the other thing if you're Carolina. You got a lot of teams losing in front of you this week, but you got some teams sneaking up. Tulane at 9-2, Arizona State at 8-2, Iowa State at 8-2. You got some teams sneaking up that are going to be making their own cases. So ultimately, I don't know. We'll see, but it's just fun to be in the conversation, honestly. Like, it's fun for us to even be on this show right now, November 25th, rivalry week, Thanksgiving week, and even be having this conversation. As Justin said, who would have predicted this after the way the ODU game went? Some of you said Carolina was going to win 2 games, so we have not forgotten that. All right, y'all, we're going to get out of here. For Chris, I'm Wes. It's been GC Live. We'll be back on Tuesday, turning the page to South Carolina versus Clemson. Appreciate y'all, as always. Appreciate our guy, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans, ClintHammond.com, 803-422-6797.